Howdy! I'm just so happy to be here today. This is my first ever vlog. My friend Angie suggested this to me instead of just writing and everything, and my vlog's been kind of dry lately, I have to admit. So I figure maybe if I do things a little bit differently, I can spice things up. So I got this flip video camera. What I was thinking what I could do is maybe just invite some of my friends on and interview them. And so, when I think about all these friends that I have, I realize I could probably make an interesting talk show kind of thing. I could have like a talk show. The problem is a lot of my friends may be a little bit reluctant to submit to the interviews. And so as much as I would like to be able to put people on the witness stand and ask them really hard questions and watch them squirm and stuff like that, I'm afraid if I do that, nobody will be willing to participate in the interviews. So I guess I'm going to have to just sort of like ask questions in a non-confrontational way. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, let me give you a little background why this thought came to my mind. I was talking to a friend on the phone yesterday who's dating a Mormon guy. And at the time, I knew she was dating somebody, but I did not know that he was a Mormon. And so we were talking about different denominations. I said, of all the different denominations out there that consider themselves Christian, I think probably Mormonism is the farthest away from Christianity. And I told her that I don't even consider Mormonism to be any form of Christianity. She had said that she doesn't consider Jehovah's Witnesses to be Christian. And I said, well, they're a lot closer to Christianity than Mormonism is, because it seems to me that Mormonism their worldview is so completely different than Christianity that, I don't even consider it a Christian religion. It has a lot of the same terminology and everything, but the ideas are completely different, especially the idea of God. If you know anything about the, the eternal law of progression, their concept of God is completely different than, Christians and Jews. And she objected. That's the point at which she told me that her boyfriend was a Mormon. And she was telling me, a lot of stuff that she had learned about Mormonism from him. And, she made the point that, Mormons do believe in one God. Well, every time I have heard a Mormon say that they believe there's only one God, they always qualify it. They always say, well, there's one God in this universe, or there's one God for this creation. But there's many creations, and there's many gods, and the God we have now had a father before him who was the creator of another world. And they also believe, according to what I am familiar with, that people who make it to the celestial kingdom, and in Mormonism there's three different kingdoms. It's the celestial, the telestial, and the terrestrial. And the celestial kingdom is the highest kingdom, and those who make it to the celestial kingdom, it's possible for them to become gods themselves, create worlds of their own with spiritual children of their own, etc., etc. And supposedly that's how our God created this world. So she objected to that. She had never heard all this before, and she thought that, they believe there's one God, period. And so she thought I was misrepresenting Mormonism. And where was I going with this? Oh, yeah, okay. I remember my point. My whole point was she had said that Mormons worship the same God that we do. And I don't really think they do. But, it got me to thinking, there's a lot of arguments out there about whether people worship the same God or not, whether people worship the same Jesus or not. Paul talks about, how there's different gospels and there's different Jesuses and all this kind of stuff. And, well, of course, even between sects of Christianity that we might consider orthodox, there are differences in beliefs about God and about Jesus. Two people may both believe in Jesus, but they have slight theological differences, so they'll believe different things about him. And in that case, they may say, well, okay, we both worship the same Jesus. We just have a disagreement about some particular things about Jesus. And the same thing might be true of God. So the question came up in my mind today, at what point do you stop saying that, okay, we worship the same God, we just have different beliefs about that God, as opposed to saying, well, we worship I mean, our beliefs about God are so different, then let's just admit that we worship two completely different gods. They're not the same God. Well, let's look. It seems to me like, there are extremes. Like, say a Calvinist and an Arminian. I think that a Calvinist and Arminians worship the same God, but they both obviously believe different things about that God, specifically about God's sovereignty. It seems clear to me that the Christian God is not the same God as the Hindu God. And the reason is because when you start describing that God or start saying things about that God, there's hardly anything in common. They're so different that you might as well say they're different gods. The Christian God is distinct from creation. The Hindu God is creation. There's no distinction in Hinduism between creator and creation. Well, there is no creation really in Hinduism. Everything's just sort of one. Everything is God. And most people will say that in Hinduism God is not a personal God. He's not a person. But according to Houston Smith in his book on world religions, in Hinduism, God is both personal and not personal. But obviously, between Hinduism and the Hindu idea of God and the Christian idea of God are so different that I think it's safe to say that they are not the same God. Now, between those two extremes, on the one hand, the difference between Christianity and Hinduism, and on the other extreme, the difference between a Calvinist and an Arminian, somewhere in between, there's got to be a gray area, an area where there's room for debate about whether we're talking about two different gods or just two different ideas of the same God. And I'm not really clear where to draw that line myself, but let me give you a couple of issues that I think are worth debating about. Now, as a Christian who sort of believes that Christianity is a continuation of Judaism, I believe that Christians worship the same God that Jews worship. Now, a Jew, seems to me, is within their epistemological rights to say that we do not worship the same God, and the reason is because the Jewish idea of God is unipersonal. They believe that God is one person, whereas most Christians believe that God is triunitarian, in other words, a trinity, that God is three persons. So I would claim that, we worship the same God. It's just that there are a few things about God that have been revealed that Jews don't accept. I don't think the Trinity contradicts anything in the Old Testament. It's just that the Trinity had not been revealed up to that point. And so I would claim we still believe in the same God. It's just that, the Trinitarian aspect of God had not been revealed to the Jews, at least not obviously. I mean, some people claim that there are passages in the Old Testament that at least allude to the idea that God is more than one person. And that's debatable, I think. But, I can understand why a Jew would say that we worship different gods. So that's one, area that seems to me is debatable. Islam is another one. Muslims will claim that Jews, Christians, and Muslims all worship the same God. But a lot of Christians will object to that, say, no, we don't worship Allah, we worship Yahweh. And so it seems to me, it is debatable because, they do claim to worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, if they claim to worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, well, that's the God I worship too. So, it seems like it is the same God. But when you look at the fact that, they also deny that Jesus is God, and they have a lot of different ideas of God than we do, that maybe, we're not worshiping the same God. We're just calling it the same thing, And that's my objection with Mormonism. They may use a lot of the same terminology, but the meaning they pour into that terminology is completely different than the meaning I pour into that terminology, or the meaning that most Christians pour into that terminology. And so the substance of what they're saying is completely different. They're talking about something completely different, even though they're sticking the same label on it. And I guess a Christian could say that about the Muslim idea of God. Even though they call it the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they're referring to a completely different God. That seems like a gray area to me, and I don't really have that resolved. So if you got any thoughts, just leave them in the comments section. And I guess that's about all I have to say about that. Thank you for joining me. Come again next time.